Welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be answering the question, what is the best body fat percentage for maximizing muscle growth? Should you stay shredded year round to, say, keep insulin sensitivity high and look sick? Or should you let body fat creep up a little bit to optimize your hormone levels and improve your strength? Well, this is highly individual. Your ideal body fat percentage for muscle growth depends on your hormones, your training performance, your recovery, and your genetics, depending on where your body fat set point is. But with that said, there is an optimal range for almost everyone. So first, we're going to go over why body fat percentage even matters for muscle growth, the pros and the cons of different body fat ranges, what the science says about insulin sensitivity, hormones, and recovery at different body fat levels. Then, how to determine your ideal body fat range to maximize muscle growth. When it comes to muscle gain, your level of body fat plays a role in a couple key areas that we're going to focus on: hormonal function, recovery, and then performance. So, if you're too lean, hormones like testosterone and other anabolic hormones will drop to suboptimal levels for muscle growth, which will then lead to recovery, suffering, and then training intensity suffering, along with strength coming down. And you'll also feel quite tired, maybe irritable, and overall not in a position to truly maximize your gains. So that's if you're too lean. But on the flip side, carrying excessive body fat will lead to things like insulin resistance, systemic inflammation, and poor nutrient partitioning, meaning more calories, more of the food you eat will get partitioned to fat rather than muscle. With all that said, though, there's no universal perfect body fat percentage for muscle growth. However, we can break down body fat into four general ranges to help guide you towards your personal sweet spot for muscle growth. So we got shredded, which is 6 to 9% body fat; lean, which is 10 to 15%; chubby, we'll call it, which is 15 to 25%; and then obese, which is 25% plus. First is shredded. This is the Instagram worthy look. Abs are sharp, vascularity's on point. You got those roadmaps in full effect. You look your best, but the reality is you probably don't feel all that great. While everybody wants to look like this and the idea of being shredded, staying shredded year round sounds amazing, very few understand the physiological and psychological costs of maintaining this condition year round. Once your body fat drops below about 10%, it'll be individual dependent, and especially when you get into the 6 to 8% range, your body perceives this as a threat to survival. From an evolutionary standpoint, like, you're starving. Your body has no reason to prioritize muscle growth or performance when it's struggling just to maintain basic physiological functions. This is why, if you're natural, hormones take a nosedive. Same with recovery and training performance. And research shows that testosterone and growth hormone production are highly sensitive to energy availability. So at very low body fat levels, these hormones can drop significantly, and that'll lead to lower energy, you constantly feeling fatigued both in and out of the gym. Sleep can become disrupted, often due to high cortisol, low leptin levels, and your nervous system, which is a key player in this, is also under constant stress. With lower body fat, your ability to regulate stress goes down, causing an overproduction of cortisol, the stress hormone, that when elevated chronically, extremely catabolic, which means it actively works against muscle growth. Another issue with being shredded is that your body is aggressively fighting to stop further fat loss. Hunger goes up crazy. You almost become obscenely food focused because your body's attempting to restore energy balance. Leptin, which is the hormone responsible for satiety, drops significantly, and that's going to lead to extreme cravings. And at the same time, ghrelin, the hormone that makes you feel hungry, goes up at the same time, making it nearly impossible to feel full. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, also goes down. Now, this is subconscious movement your body does throughout the day. So things like fidgeting, potentially standing, like if you're standing up or you're going to lean over, walking, because when you're this lean, your body is trying to conserve energy by reducing all non-essential movement as a survival mechanism. So even if you eat the same amount, you're going to be burning fewer calories because your body is subconsciously slowing down. All of this making maintaining single-digit body fat incredibly difficult without extreme amount of discipline, and even then your body is constantly fighting to bring you back up to that higher body fat percentage. And beyond the physical toll, there is a serious mental cost as well to staying too lean. Many people will experience irritability, mood swings, very difficult time concentrating, and brain fog becomes more common because your body's prioritizing energy for survival, not necessarily optimal brain function. Socially, too, you're less inclined to be social with people because social interactions can potentially feel draining, or if it's related to your mood, you just don't feel like going out and talking to people. So long story short, at this point, your body's not in an anabolic muscle building state. It's much more leaning towards a survival mode. So you may look unbelievably impressive, but building muscle at this level of body fat is not optimal by any stretch. So if you think staying at 6 to 9% body fat long term is a good strategy, I mean, look at the professional bodybuilders. Even they don't try to stay that lean all year round. And after a bodybuilding competition, the first thing they do is intentionally regain some body fat to reverse some of those negative adaptations that occurred, restore hormonal balance, improve recovery, and then optimize their training performance for their next phase. The same applies to natural athletes. Studies show that drug-free bodybuilders experience massive drops in testosterone during a contest prep, which is basically when they're trying to get extremely lean to around that 5, 6, 7% body fat, and then it takes months to restore hormones post show. So if you're shredded and struggling to build muscle, the best thing you can do is allow yourself to gain some body fat. To summarize, for muscle growth, allowing yourself to gain some fat is essential. If you're currently sitting at around 6 to 9% body fat, you may feel great at 9%, there are some outliers, but if you're struggling to gain muscle, giving yourself permission to add a few percentage points of fat will do more for your physique in the long run than trying to maintain an unsustainable level of leanness. Remember, muscle building requires an environment where your body feels safe to grow, and it's not going to happen when it's in survival. So the next category is lean, the 10 to 15% body fat, which is the sweet spot for most people. If you're aiming for maximum muscle gain with minimal fat accumulation, this is the range you want to be in. The 10 to 15% body fat range is often considered the optimal zone for muscle building because it does provide the perfect balance between leanness, so you still look good, you look like you lift, and performance. It allows you to gain muscle efficiently while keeping fat gain under control, making it quite the ideal body fat percentage for most people looking to maximize hypertrophy. At this body fat level as well, your body is hormonally optimized for muscle growth. Testosterone, growth hormone, two of the most anabolic hormones, are at their highest, ensuring that protein synthesis, recovery, and training performance are all firing at full capacity. Insulin sensitivity remains high as well, which means your body is highly efficient at shuttling carbohydrates into the muscle cells rather than storing them as body fat. And this is pretty crucial because insulin is one of the most anabolic hormones, and its ability to efficiently transport nutrients determines how effectively you build muscle versus store body fat. Then beyond hormones, this range also supports overall health. Your sleep quality is going to be significantly better than when you're too lean, as your body isn't under extreme amounts of stress and cortisol isn't constantly elevated, which is very important because deep restorative sleep, I mean, it's your number one recovery tool. It plays a huge role in your muscle growth, your nervous system recovery, as well as your performance. So maintaining a body fat level that supports good sleep is at the utmost of priority. And at 10 to 15%, your energy levels remain high. Training intensity is also at the best in this range because you have just enough body fat to support joint health, tendon strength, and overall resilience without excess weight holding you back. This range is also highly sustainable, both physically and mentally, unlike being completely shredded where hunger and food focus can be quite intense. At around 10 to 15% body fat, appetite is well regulated for most people for the most part. You're eating enough calories to fuel training, recovery, and also daily life, but not so much that you experience excessive fat gain or potentially metabolic inefficiencies. So overall, this is the sweet spot where muscle gain is efficient, training is optimized, and recovery is great for the majority of people. And this range is also very versatile. If you're on the leaner end, let's say 10 to 12%, you may have a little more room to push a longer bulk without accumulating excessive body fat. If you're on the higher end, let's say 13 to 15%, you may want to be slightly more mindful of how aggressively you push your food intake and your surplus size to prevent unnecessary fat gain. But either way, staying within this range does ensure you're operating as optimally as you can really for muscle growth. For most people, this is where you want to live year round if your goal is to build muscle while staying lean and healthy. So it's basically the best combination of both worlds. Now on to the chubby category, which is the 15 to 25% body fat range. Once you enter this range, muscle growth is still very possible, and for some individuals, this range can be beneficial specifically for strength. This is why you'll often see powerlifters in this range. They'll push quite higher than this as well, but as you push closer to the higher end of this range, the trade-offs then become more apparent. And one of the biggest negatives at this level of body fat is, other than your appearance, is reduced insulin sensitivity. As body fat increases, insulin sensitivity tends to decrease, making it harder for your body to process and store carbs more efficiently, and that can mean more of the excess calories you consume are likely to be stored as fat rather than used to build muscle, and this is known as the P ratio. Another issue in this range is higher systemic inflammation because carrying extra body fat has been linked to increased inflammatory markers and chronic low-grade inflammation, which will negatively impact recovery, joint health, as well as decreased performance in the gym, which all equals less muscle growth. Another pretty big drawback of being in this range is just actually tracking your muscle building progress. As your body fat increases, it's going to become harder to visually assess whether you're actually gaining muscle or just accumulating excessive fat. So this is why many people feel maybe bigger in this range, but not necessarily more muscular. With all that said, not everything in this range is 100% negative. Some individuals, very few, but some actually thrive in this body fat percentage. More specifically, those focused on maximizing strength and power output. When you carry a little extra weight, your joints and connective tissues are a little better supported, which can lead to better leverage on compound lifts like squats, deadlifts, and bench, which is again why many of the elite powerlifters, like I mentioned, strongmen, those guys are going to be in the next category, but those guys actually push a little higher than this range, and you'll see football players, depending on their position, perform exceptionally well at higher body fat percentage, the O-line, D-line guys, because their priority is not necessarily aesthetics, it's more strength and power. However, if you're in this range and your goal is to maximize muscle growth, it's time to run a short mini cut if you're around that 15% range, get you down to around 10 to 12%, and if you're currently sitting around 25%, a full fat loss phase would be the move to get you down to that 10 to 12%, to then set yourself up with a great long runway to gain muscle. You'll get improved insulin sensitivity, less inflammation, overall much better state to maximize muscle growth. And lastly, we have the obese category, which is the 25% plus, which is absolutely when it's time to cut right now, okay? Let's get into a fat loss phase. Once your body fat exceeds 25%, muscle gain is still technically possible, don't get me wrong, but at this stage, the negatives begin to significantly outweigh the benefits. The body is no longer in an optimal state for building lean muscle tissue, and continuing to eat in a caloric surplus will just result in more fat gain than muscle growth. Not to mention, in this range, excessive systemic inflammation is a problem because fat itself, not just an energy source tissue, it's also an active endocrine organ that secretes inflammatory cytokines. This means that body fat that's sitting on you doesn't just maybe look not so nice, but it's constantly just creating inflammation all day long. And that means as body fat increases, inflammation increases as well. And that'll lead to every single negative that takes us away from our goal of building muscle. And beyond inflammation, insulin sensitivity will take a massive hit at this level because of excessive body fat. Hormonal balance, definitely not going to be optimal. And research has shown that higher levels of body fat are correlated with lower testosterone and higher estrogen. And at the same time, excessive fat tissue produces aromatase, an enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. Elevated estrogen levels will lead to things like water retention, mood swings, gyno, potential drop in overall motivation as well. But beyond the hormonal and the metabolic negative outcomes, the overall health implications at this body fat, carrying too much body fat negatively impacts mobility, endurance, and training performance, which means reduced work capacity, which equals less overall training volume and the intensity of your training, which will then directly impact the rate at which you're able to gain muscle. So if you're currently in this category and you're serious about maximizing muscle growth and your health, your best bet is to prioritize fat loss before going into a bulk. So then you're setting yourself up for, you're kind of setting the stage for a much more productive lean bulk afterwards. So how can you determine your best body fat percentage for muscle growth? Well, the ideal body fat percentage for optimal muscle growth depends on a combination of your personal response to training, your energy levels, your body fat set point, and while there is no universal body fat percentage for everyone, like we spoke about earlier, there are clear physiological advantages and disadvantages at different levels of leanness. So for most individuals, like we covered, staying under 10% body fat while trying to gain muscle is a little counterproductive. There are definitely some outliers to this who are just naturally lean and have always been that way. So for those people, they may be absolutely fine under 10%, but for the majority of us, the 10 to 15% range is the sweet spot. And ideally, you start your bulk at around 10%. Then you have a long time slowly gaining in small surplus over many, many months until you get up to that 13, 14, 15%, wherever you're comfortable. Then you run a short mini cut right back down to 10% and then rinse and repeat that process. So that wraps up today's podcast. I do have in the first link in the description a free 30-day email series that will set up your nutrition for you. It'll give you 2 free training plans to choose from, along with every day a little short actionable piece of information that will help you level up your physique, your performance, and your health. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.